It's the Criterion. It's the Criterion. Criterion. N. Project.
Hello, everybody. It's time for a new Criterion Project episode. Only this time we're doing things a little bit differently. I am Conrado, and I am here with the wonderful Rachel Wagner. Rachel, how are you doing? And most importantly, where are you doing?
I am coming to you from the from the crossroads of the West. Very exciting. I'm here at Sundance Film Festival, and I have been immersed in hipsters for 4 days, and I've seen lots of cinema, and so I'm very excited to talk to you. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, Rachel is usually away from the Hollywood elite, but once a year, the Hollywood elite comes to her.
That's true.
And she gets to go to Sundance. So Rachel will be sharing the movies that she's been seeing and what she thinks of them. But before we get into that, we have a bit of news about Criterion. It was revealed a while ago that Criterion is going to be releasing Roma on DVD, the movie by Alfonso Cuarón that famously was released by Netflix and won a bunch of Oscars. And it was a bit of news because Netflix usually does not release its movies on DVD or Blu-ray or anything like that, only on their platform. So it was the first Netflix movie that was going to actually get a physical release because of Criterion. And now they have announced earlier this week that they will be releasing 4 more Netflix movies, The Irishman, Marriage Story, American Factory, and Atlantics. So, Rachel, what do you think of this news?
Yeah, I'm just learning this actually this morning, and I think it's really interesting because Netflix, despite being a major, corporate giant, has managed to somehow brand itself as like an indie darling, which is really interesting. And I was going to talk about that here at Sundance because one of the things that's frustrating is that we don't have the same, I think, spirit of independent film that we used to have at Sundance. That, I mean, for instance, on Friday night, both of the movies that I saw were both Netflix movies at Sundance, and there's actually a Disney film screening here, which is kind of bizarre. And so I don't know. It's an interesting thing but I mean, all those movies do kind of fit the mold, I feel like. Of a Criterion
definitely
film.
I agree with that. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting for Criterion a little bit, but it's also, I think, very interesting for Netflix and what they are trying to do and what they are trying to establish as their brand. I mean, it seems pretty clear, even more so now. I mean, we knew because they had spent a lot of money trying to get Oscars for Roma last year and this year for Irishman and Marriage Story and some others, that they are very interested in having that sort of prestige, legitimacy thing attached to their brand. So, they've been to the Cannes Film Festival and they go to Sundance and they go to New York Film Festival and they want to get awards and they want to be released by Criterion. So, I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of their brand management. I think it's also interesting. I wonder if we will see these movies on the channel at some point, on the Criterion channel, which I think my guess is probably not because, they're Netflix movies. So I assume that the deal is just for physical release. But I would love to see, especially when they do the sort of like in the channel, when they have the version of the full disc on the channel and you have the extras and the special features available, because I would love to see some of those for like Roma or Atlantics or some of those movies,
Yeah, I mean, it just seems unlikely just because then you'd have streaming their own content streaming against them.
Yeah.
But that would be a cool if there was like a I don't know, some way to kind of a director's cut or some way to kind of make them different. That might be that would be really cool for sure.
That would be really interesting. But of course, this is all speculation. So just interesting to see what's happening with that. So I guess we'll talk about it again if any of that develops and there's any news on that
Mm-hmm.
front.
Yeah, and it's just I just feel like, well, I mean, there's a couple things. I just feel like the whole idea of sort of somebody making a movie for $100,000 out of their van. The idea of sort of Sundance is that kind of thing is you just don't see that as much anymore, and it's all just very, not all, but it's a lot more sort of corporatized, and I hate to see that also kind of coming into Criterion as well. It's just like, where's the bastion for like for that kind of hidden gem if it's not in Criterion, and if it's not at Sundance, I mean, what else is left?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can pivot into Sundance in a moment, but I think it's important to say that Criterion, at the end of the day, is a company, right? And a lot of its decisions are made based on what is going to sell and what isn't, and what fits their brand and the sort of thing that people are interested in. So that's why a lot of people have actually, talked about the certain, that most of the Criterion releases are American and European, and there's not, even though there are some really notable, there's not that many releases from Asia and from other countries in the world, and directors of color, and that all that kind of thing. So
that's a good point.
Always to keep in mind that even though Criterion has developed this reputation as some sort of like stamp of approval, in a kind of in a cinema history kind of way, it is at the end of the day a business, and we should keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good.
Yeah, same goes for Sundance. So why don't you tell us about your experience at Sundance this year, and also, since you already started talking about it, compared to other years, and how do you feel about the festival?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I didn't get the pass that I really wanted. They have the locals pass, which allows you to go to any movie at any theater, and in the Salt Lake, because there's two hubs of Sundance. There's the Park City hub, which is where the stars are and things like that. And then there's the Salt Lake hub, which is I think it's about 7 theaters. And Park City is actually a pretty long drive from my house. It's over an hour. And so I don't go to the Park City side of it at all, because I'm not a celebrity person. That's not interesting to me. And so I just go to the Salt Lake side. And at the last 2 years, the previous 2 festivals, I've had the locals pass, which meant I had a lot more flexibility as far as what I could see, and because I could just go, and when you have a pass, you don't have to wait in the ticketed line. You just go right up and you can get into anything, and it's so nice. I was so bummed about that. But I did get a pass called the Grand Pass, which is a theater. It's the community college that has showings on the weekends. The only downside to the Grand Pass is that the Grand tends to have more of your what they call premieres. So it's movies that aren't. They have the next generation films, which are more of those sort of edgy ones that I was referring to, but the premieres are usually your more corporate films that are going to get full out rollouts in the theater. Right. So it's kind of like, anyway, so it's good because sometimes it allowed me to see more stuff. So I got a 10-pack of tickets for during the weekday, because the Grand's only open for Sundance on the weekends. And then I went to, and a lot of times the premieres have already premiered at TIFF. And so anyway, that wasn't perfect, but I've seen 11 films in 4 days. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
pretty
That's
good.
great.
And I feel like last year, the last 2 years, I saw more movies right away that I really liked a lot. And
Mhm.
I've really I've
What
only
were they?
so last year I loved the documentary called Maiden,
Uh-huh.
and it's about it's I love underdog sports movies, whether documentary
Mhm.
or narrative. It's a favorite genre of mine, and this is about the first all women's sailing team in the race around the world in 1989,
Mm.
and they just did such a great job of combining new footage with old footage, new interviews, old interviews, and just making you just want to cheer throughout. It was so well done. I loved it. It was one of my favorites of the whole year.
Right.
And then also I loved Blinded by the Light last year,
Right.
by Grenda Chatter, which is about a young man in England in the 1980s who discovers Bruce Springsteen. And
Mhm.
what I thought it did so well, and it was also in my top 10 of the year, what I thought it did so well is it really captured that feeling of becoming really responding to something when you're a teenager
Mm.
and becoming kind of alive with this new thing. And I remember when I was a freshman in high school, I first heard Les Mis, and I just loved it so much. And I watched the 10th anniversary concert special that they did over and over and over and over again. I had recorded off of PBS, and I knew every line to every song. I absolutely loved it. And that experience of when you're a teenager and something really connects with you is just such a unique experience. And I thought the movie really captured that well. And it was just such a lovely little movie. So those were my two favorites that stayed in my favorites for the whole year. I also loved The Farewell, uh,
Oh yeah.
and and I loved The Report. I thought that was really well
Oh
done.
yes. I like both those movies. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen the other two, but
Yeah.
Well and The Report are both really good.
Mm-hmm. And then I also really thought The Mustang was great. About it's about a man in prison who is just like so full of rage, and yet you felt a lot of empathy for him. And it was Matthias Schoenhardt, who I thought was one of the best performances of the year. And they have a program of working with horses, wild horses, at the
Mm.
at the prison, and I thought it was really well done. I also really enjoyed Late Night, so I had quite a few last year that I
All
really
right.
liked.
What about
Uh,
this year?
so this year, well, we'll go into the individual films. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
this year, and I don't know if it's because I've had the Grand Pass, um, I just have been kind of blah. And I mean,
Okay.
there's only been one movie that I really just was like, ugh, that was terrible. Most of them are
Okay.
like, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. But I haven't had that excitement except for one movie the final movie that I saw last night, I loved, and I can't wait to tell everybody about it.
Okay.
But I think maybe it's just because I saw all these premieres, and it's
Okay.
not the same as maybe some of the other experiences. And I've heard some good things about some of the other ones that I missed out. I haven't seen, or I'm going to be seeing. Like, I'm going to see Palm Springs tomorrow, and I've heard really good things about
Mm.
that.
And that just got sold for, I think, a record amount of money. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Uh,
one of the big hits, supposedly, of the festival. Although we'll see how it goes. Sometimes the ones that sell for the most money end up being kind of like box office disappointments later.
yeah.
But
I know. I'm almost surprised that they're that they're that the studios are taking the risk on some of these, because
yeah,
especially last year, almost every indie that was mean, Blinded by the Light did terrible at the box
Mhm.
office, for instance.
And that Late Night did pretty bad too. Well, The Farewell was the big exception, I would say,
Yeah,
to that. But I think that might have already been, no, that was sold at Sundance, I think, to
yeah,
A24, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and that was one of, but for every Farewell, you have like a 5 or 10 that don't really hit.
yeah. Late Night was a big
Mhm.
disappointment. So it's interesting. This is another year that they didn't have any animation except for the animation spotlight. But because it was on Saturday and that's the day I had my grand pass, I didn't see the animation spotlight.
Um,
But honestly, every year I end up hating it.
oh,
So
really?
I feel like I go out of sort of obligation because I'm an animation person. But I I just it's just usually terrible. Um, hold on a sec. It's last year especially. It was not for me. This is just you have too many people that are trying to be edgy and like not make an animated film, like whatever, not make a film for kids. So it's like the worst. I really dislike the
Okay.
animation spotlight. So I don't know. Maybe this year is the exception because I'm not attending. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, there was. I'm trying to think last year as far as indies that they wasn't at Sundance, but the Peanut Butter Falcon did well for itself, which I loved that movie. And then also um, the Good Boys. I didn't see it, but it did pretty well for a
Oh, yeah.
small little
Was
comedy.
that an indie movie? I thought there was a studio, but maybe it wasn't. Um,
I think it was out of
yeah.
South by Southwest is where it premiered, but
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong about that. But yeah, anyway, so it's a digital experience. So you've had the chance to go to film festivals in the past. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been to a couple of film festivals. The only one that I go to regularly at this point is the New York Film Festival,
Mm-hmm.
which happens around early October, late September, early October, in here in New York City. And yeah, so I used to go here and there to New York until I got into a program they have that's called the Critics Academy. That was back in
Mm-hmm.
2015. So it was me and about 7 other young people who were breaking into film criticism and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And yeah, and we had we got a press pass, so we got to see all of the press screenings. And then for 1 week after the screenings were done in the evening, we had like sort of like workshop sessions with a number of film critics. Stephanie Saharik from she's in Time now, but back then she was in the Village Voice, and then Richard Brody from the New Yorker was there,
Mm-hmm.
and even Armand White was there, one of the famous Contrarian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so that was a great experience. I loved that, um, and ever since then, I've been going much more regularly to the New York Film Festival. Um, because even though the reason I didn't used to go as much is because I was a student and I was broke, and most of the
Mm-hmm.
movies that play in New York end up having uh, like theatrical releases not that far after, especially in New
Yeah.
York City, right? Like most of them premiere at the end of the year in New York, or then maybe like early the next year, right?
Right.
But what I discovered after the Critics Academy and started going is that if you get to see, well, I discovered there's some stuff that is like really hard to see otherwise, and a few movies. And then there's, if you get a ticket in the really big theater, which is the Alice Tully Hall, which is only available for the New York Film Festival to screen movies. It's a huge screen, and the crowd is there, and everyone's excited. And it's just really
Mm-hmm.
cool and really exciting to see a movie there. That's where I've seen
Yeah.
some of the best movies of the last couple of years, and I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of good points. If people ask me about going to Sundance or things and or going to a festival, and I said one of my first advice that I try to give is find out about a festival that's near you, that's closer, or near someone that you know or can stay with or whatever, because uh, you might think, oh, that's not one of the big ones. It's not TIFF or South by Southwest or Sundance, but they still have, a lot of times they have the same movies that that they'll do the festival circuit. And so
Yeah.
that's one of my first suggestions is find a festival near you and support that. You maybe even volunteer,
Mhm.
and that can be a great way of not only getting to see some really cool films, but also supporting the arts in your own community.
Yeah, definitely. I would 100% agree with that. And yeah, and not only for new movies, I think there's a lot of regional festivals all over the country that some of them are for older movies, but that are very hard to find otherwise. Like you might
Mhm.
not get to see on DVD, or they're not streaming, and or like strange movies. And this might be the one chance that you get to actually get to see them, something like really special that you haven't
Mhm.
thought about. So depends on what you like. Like
Yeah.
if you like, especially if you're into any kind of foreign film, like if you're into like Hong Kong movies,
Mhm.
action, like martial arts, or anything like that, you would probably it's not so easy to find those movies a lot of the time, so you can take
Mhm.
advantage of festivals.
Yeah, that's very true. Like uh, 2 years ago at Sundance, I saw this Turkish movie called Butterflies, and I've been watching and watching, hoping it would get released. Maybe Criterion someday will, but I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It has this recurring joke of these chickens that eat gunpowder and explode, and I every time it would happen, I would die laughing, and I'm just like, please release it. But I agree with you that it's also kind of like this little gem that that me and what 200 people that were in that theater have seen that nobody else has seen, unless you're in Turkey, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and that's cool. It's a cool thing, so yeah, that's one of the first advice I would give. And yeah, I've also been uh, made sure that I looked for local passes, local deals. There's often a way to do it so it's not quite as onerous, as expensive as might otherwise be. I don't know. Do you have any tips or suggestions that you would give for people interested in going to a festival?
um I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with, it depends on the specific festival that you're
Mm-hmm.
going to, so I really can't speak to it, but I will agree with you what you said about support your local festivals and your local art house theater if there's one in your town or near to your town or wherever you live, your city, because those folks are doing really good work, and they're putting in the time and effort to curate programs and curate festivals, which is not easy. And they want you to see the movies. That's the other thing. But like local festivals will love for you to come and see the movies. So
Yeah.
uh, so go there, find out about them, get involved, and
Mm-hmm.
have a great time.
It's true. Some other suggestions that I would have, at least for Sundance, is I would suggest talking to other people that are attending the festival that have in the past, and find out like where the good places are to eat. Also, if you can bring food, I would usually recommend that, because usually, you can't live off popcorn. And then the other a suggestion that I would have is to talk to people when you're in line. Not only is it fun, but it's also a great way to find out what has been hitting at the festival.
Mm.
And if maybe you can figure out a way to go see some films that weren't on your radar. Like I've talking to people, I found out that Uncle Frank has been a big hit. I would not have ever thought of that, so I'm trying to see if I can see it. And that can be a really good way of making connections. Also then you can follow on social media, become
Mm.
friends, whatever. I've actually, maybe not as much in Sundance, but I used to do the grind where I would go and get wait for advanced screenings, and you'd have to go about 2 hours early in order to secure your ticket, because you had a ticket but it wasn't an actual ticket. And anyway, I made a lot of friends through just talking to people. What have you been seeing? What, what's good? And that's something I would definitely recommend at the festival, and especially if you do have a pass, because the same people have the same passes, are in the same line, and it can be a really fun way of kind of getting to know people, because you see them repeatedly and you're like, oh, what did you think of that one last night, or that kind of thing. And so that's something I would recommend.
Yeah, get your festival buddies. I
Yeah.
will also say sometimes it's fun to see people who don't know what they're getting into with some of the movies at the festivals,
That's true.
Yeah, who will like go into, I don't know, like a Ho Shao Shan movie that is like 2 hours of stillness and art cinema, and they're like, what the hell is this, or whatever. Yeah,
that's true.
yeah. But why don't we get into it? We have 11 movies to discuss, so let's start. I have them in front of me, and I'll go through them, and you'll tell me what you think about them and what your experience was. So
and over on my blog, I have daily logs that I've been doing, where I have my reviews of everything that I see, and you can find it also on Rotten Tomatoes, all of my reviews.
Fantastic. Great, so let's get into it. Rachel, tell me about Taylor Swift.
Okay, so this is Taylor Swift, Miss Americana, and I overall I thought this was fine, perfectly serviceable. I think you can compare it to like the Katy Perry movie or the Justin Bieber movie or any of those kind of things. If you like Taylor Swift, if you like her music, then you'll enjoy it. Like, it's perfectly fine. I think that I had to kind of wonder its placement in Sundance, whether it deserved a spot, not only because it's being released, like, I think this week on Netflix, which is kind of an eye roll, but also it just felt very slight to me. They try to give it some gravitas in her sort of political awakening, I guess, which sure, that's admirable, but I thought that some of that was a bit of a reach. Like, for instance, the big thing was that, so she comes out in support of a Democratic candidate in Tennessee, and that's in 2018, and the documentary tries to compare that experience to what happened to the Dixie Chicks in 2003. And I thought that was a major reach, because the Dixie Chicks, first of all, that was at the height of the Iraq War. And then also there were actually country singers, whereas Taylor Swift hasn't been a country singer in a long time. And if anything, in 2018, coming out in support of the Democrat as a pop star is gonna help your career, not hurt your career. I mean, it'd be more risky to do the other, to endorse the Republican, frankly. And I just thought that was all a little groan-worthy. But like I said, if you want to watch her sing, she sings a lot. There's some behind the scenes with her playing with her cat and her mom, and that kind of stuff is fun. So I did give it a fresh score, but just
a soft fresh.
Yeah.
A soft pass. But tell me something. This is not a concert movie, right? It's more of a documentary following her process, I guess, and her life.
And they I guess they started filming the documentary in 2018, so most of the previous stuff is her own home videos and stuff like that, and they do go into a little bit into a sexual assault trial that she had to deal with. So that was interesting. I thought that was a good part. I was a little disappointed that they didn't go into this recent her
feud with Scooter Braun, right? And her ministers.
They didn't talk about that at all. That would have been interesting, I think. It's like I said, it's very similar to the Justin Bieber movie or the Katy Perry movie or that kind of a thing.
Interesting. So I'm definitely going to see this, because I don't know if you know this about me, but my thesis project when I graduated undergrad was a full-length musical play about Taylor Swift and her life that I wrote and directed.
No way. I
So
didn't realize that. I knew you were a big fan, but
yeah.
I didn't.
So I actually became a fan while doing that project, because of all the research that I did on her. And I think the reason why I did that, and what I feel like she's a very interesting persona
Mhm.
to me, because of how uh, protective she is about so much stuff, and her image. And I feel
Mhm.
like she's very emblematic of the way celebrity works nowadays, in a more, I guess, polished way than like the Kardashians or something like that,
Right.
um, and so I'm really looking forward to this, because I find it interesting, the thing. I've heard some of the things that we're talking about, because people have been talking about what is and isn't in a documentary, and the whole thing about the Dixie Chicks comparison, which I think it has more. Well, I mean, I don't know how they do it in the movie because I haven't seen it, but have heard her talk before about, not so much that her coming out in support of the Tennessee Democrat was like the Dixie Chicks, but rather that the Dixie Chicks, what they did had such repercussions in the country music world that she grew up being told over and over again not to do something like that
Mhm.
ever, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know, maybe I think you're right to a certain degree, and I think this documentary, maybe in part she's doing it because she got so much flack before in the 2016 election, when she wouldn't, a lot of people were wondering if she would endorse Hillary, or if she was actually
Mhm.
supporting Trump, or what was going on there, because she wouldn't say anything, because she had gone to trial, for the sexual harassment thing. So there was a lot of questioning of what her deal was. So this seems like a pointed correction on her part about that, and trying to get the record straight. We'll
Yeah.
see what I think about it after I see it, because
Yeah.
she's a tricky character.
Yeah, and I wish that they had gone a little bit more into her songwriting. There's lots of scenes where she's singing, but like in the studio recording things, but because I think that's actually her strength. I think she's a pretty good songwriter, and I would have liked to have seen a little more of that. But I didn't hate it. I liked it. It's perfectly fine.
Oh, good.
Like
All
if you're
right.
looking at what a movie is trying to be, it succeeds. It being that
All
kind
right.
of film. So I did go fresh on it, and so
Yeah.
there you go.
Great. Okay, so let's move along. I don't know if we can spend quite much this time on it,
Yeah.
because we have a lot to talk about. But why don't you tell me
Okay.
about Crip Camp?
Okay, so Crip Camp is a Netflix documentary, and I was under the assumption going into it that it was about this camp for disabled men and kids, teens in the 1970s, and really it's just that's sort of a starting point, and it's about the whole disabled rights campaign that sort of culminates in the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it was really good. It was really inspirational, really incredible characters. I mean, I would have liked to have learned a little bit more about the camp, but it's definitely one of the better films I saw at the festival so far.
Oh, great. That sounds good. And that's also a Netflix release?
Yes,
Do you know when it's coming out?
I think in February.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be available soon, just like the Taylor Swift documentary.
Yeah, and I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Oh, good.
Pretty
So
good score.
a good recommendation. All right.
Yeah.
That sounds very interesting. But let's move on to the next
Okay.
one, which is Bad Hair.
Yeah. So Bad Hair is going to be very divisive. It definitely has the feel of Sorry to Bother You, which I was not a big fan of. I know a lot of other people really enjoyed it, but I think it's going to be divisive, kind of like that film. But I really actually enjoyed Bad Hair. It's about this woman who gets a weave, and it ends up killing people. It's the evil weave. And I thought it was campy and over the top and funny. And I particularly loved Vanessa Williams as her insane boss.
Okay.
Like she was really really funny to me. And it's obviously not like, it's not satire made for my demographic, but I still, so it'll be interesting to see what uh, African American critics, what they think. I have one friend, the Curvy Critic is her name, that she really enjoyed it and went fresh on that Rotten Tomatoes. So it'll be interesting to see what the kind of the verdict is on it. You can also compare it a little to Get Out as far as the combination of comedy and horror. I also thought of Drag Me to Hell a little bit with it, with some of the sort of more gross out moments. But I really thought it was funny, and so I think people should give it a shot. See what you think.
Oh, great! You're speaking my language with that Drag Me to Hell comparison, because I love that movie.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something about this, because I am also like you, not the biggest fan of Sorry to Bother You.
Interesting.
Which I think it's got some interesting ideas, but I didn't love it. So in what way would you say? What do you think about Bad Hair works that didn't for you in Sorry to Bother You?
I just think that Sorry to Bother You loses its way. I think the first like 30 to 45 minutes is really funny, and then when it gets just too caught up in the horse thing and the party, and I just think it's just too much for me.
Okay.
And whereas this,
so unfocused.
Yeah, and I it just keeps like piling on metaphors after metaphors after metaphor. It's like trying to say too much. I felt like, I think I said in my review at the time, it's like the person thought they'd only be able to make one movie, so they included every idea they'd ever had into one film. Whereas this, to me, does feel more focused, and it's maybe not as bold to some people, but I thought it was just, I don't know. I thought it was a lot funnier to me.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely heard that criticism of Sorry to Bother You before, and I think I kind of partially agree. I appreciate that the director of that movie, Boots Riley, was trying to say so many things with it, but I agree with you. Maybe it could have been a little more, I don't know, polished. Maybe it was a little too many things.
So that's kind of my thought with it. And it, anytime you have this kind of satire, it's going to work with some people. It's just not going to work with others. So I expect this film, right now it's 61% on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't surprise me at all. It's going to be divisive.
But you gave it a fresh, I see.
I did. 7 out of 10.
That's exciting. Great.
So
and let's move on to another one that you gave 7 out of 10, which is called Iron Bark.
Iron Bark. And so this film, it's about it's true story. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch as this man who is approached by, he's a British man that is approached by the CIA and asked to do work for them in his various travels to the USSR. This is during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and what the things that he finds end up being really influential in preventing the Cuban missile crisis. And it's fairly by the numbers, I have to say, as far as this kind of movie. Benedict Cumberbatch is very good in the role. He loses a lot of weight. I guess that they did the initial shoot, and then they took 3 months off so that he could lose a ton of weight, because he ends up imprisoned at one point in the film. And so it is a dramatic transformation. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this come up in the good old Oscar discussion. It wouldn't surprise me, because they love that kind of thing, the Oscars. And he is very good. And I thought that Rachel Brosnahan was pretty good as the one of the agents, and I'm trying to think of the other person. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But anyway, the cast overall was good. Jessie Buckley is his wife, and I'm on a huge Jessie Buckley high right now because of Wild Rose and how much I loved that film. and she doesn't get to sing, unfortunately. But anyway, it is on a certain degree by the numbers as far as this kind of story, but I thought it was all executed well, and I thought it was a good film. I enjoyed it.
All right. So we'll see when that comes out what other people think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Great. Now we're moving on to one that I don't think you liked very much, which is called Worth.
Yes. So this is a challenging film because it is well done. It's well acted. It's got a great cast of Michael Keaton, Amy Ryan, and all the rest of the supporting cast. Stanley Tucci is in it. So it's hard to fault it on any of that kind of level. It's very polished and well made. It's about the man who was in charge of the victims, the 9/11 victim fund, compensation fund, and about how they're able to get everybody on board of the fund. And it covers like a year in this person's life. And Michael Keaton does put on a pretty thick New York accent. I guess my problem with the movie was almost more fundamental. I just felt like the whole main purpose of Michael Keaton's character is to get people to not sue the airlines and the American these various companies that will then hurt the American economy. And so I just didn't feel like that was a very compelling story. Like I left it thinking, does this story need to be told about this guy who's in charge of the Victims Compensation Fund? I don't think so. And I kept feeling like every single person that came in and shared their story about their suffering with the loss of their loved one was more interesting. I was like, why can't the movie be about that person? That's more interesting than this Michael Keaton guy. And I'm not saying what he didn't matter. Of course it mattered, but there's lots of things that people do that's very important that doesn't need to be told. And I felt like this would be great as like a 15-minute, 60 minutes piece, you know?
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah.
That it sounds like something more suited to like a podcast episode or something.
Yeah, or like 2020 or something like that. You learn more about this guy, but I don't know. They tried to kind of give it weight with like the Stanley Tucci character and other things, but I was like, why isn't this movie about the Stanley Tucci character? He's way more interesting. And so that was my main problem with the movie. Was I just felt like it wasn't a cinematic story, and it wasn't a story that was interesting.
All right. Well, you can't win them all.
No. So I give it a 4.5 out of 10.
All right. And what about this next movie, 4 Good Days?
Yeah, this is a really frustrating one because, again, it has so much potential. It's about Glenn Close. She plays this woman whose daughter is a heroin addict and has been in detox 14 times. And the daughter's played by Mila Kunis. And it starts out really well. There's this whole scene where she will not allow her daughter to come into the house, and she makes her daughter sleep on the patio outside. Okay. And she establishes their relationship really well right at the beginning. But the script, I thought, went completely off the rails in the last act. I did not buy the choices that the Glenn Close character made in the last act. I won't spoil it, but it kind of ruined the movie for me. I was just, there's no way that character would do what she does. And so it ended up at 4 out of 10 for me.
Okay, interesting. I know I'm curious to know what happens at the end, but I guess we should not spoil it for other people. No. So I guess this is not going to be the movie Glenn Close finally wins her Oscar after being what happened last year.
She's very good in it, so it could be. But
you think it could be?
The script. Script is the problem.
I don't know. I think Glenn's going to have to keep trying.
Yeah. I mean, she is good in it, though. Is all I'm saying.
All right.
But.
Well, Great. So moving on to the next one, which is called Us Kids or US Kids?
US Kids.
US
And
Kids.
so this one, on the surface, it might seem like I don't like it because I'm conservative. And it was kind of funny to me because they were really excited, and like the producers were declaring a lot of victory over the defeat of the congressman that I actually volunteered for and that I think is great.
Oh.
But that's not the reason why the movie didn't work for me, I promise. So it's about the Parkland kids and this whole bus tour that they went on to try to influence the midterm elections. And I like learning about anybody, whether they politically agree with me or not. And my problem with movies, I didn't feel like I did get to know them at all. I mean, I left this movie knowing almost nothing about these teenagers, except for the fact that they'd been through trauma and that they were this initiative against guns, and all that I already knew. I didn't find anything about their what kind of families. There's not a single interview with any adults in this movie, which I guess could be considered a bold choice, but there's not any interviews with any of their parents. There's nothing with any of the people that were supervising this tour at all. And I just felt like I didn't learn, are they gay? Are they straight? What's their ethnicity? What's their, are their parents divorced? Is that difficult for them? Like, I just knew nothing about any of these teens that I didn't already know before. So I didn't think it was very good.
So are there interviews with the kids, with the teens? Did they get interviewed?
Yeah, but I just felt like it was all sort of talking points.
What did they talk about? I guess
they talk about the trauma of the shooting, which is of course horrible, and then they talk about their experiences on the tour, and they also weren't like very specific as far as what they wanted to accomplish. The guns are bad, but as far as like what actual like policies are you interested in, what do you think will work, what will stop, so yeah, without getting too much into politics or anything like that, the problem I had with it is I just didn't feel like I got to know the kids very well.
All right. Well, that sounds like, it sounds like even if it was something that was trying to go more for the issues than the kids themselves, the issues are not very specific either. So I guess that's.
And I have to say, David Ehrlich, who is by no means a conservative, he also gave it a rotten for the same reason. So I feel a little vindicated with that.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, there's only 3 reviews. I see it's you, David Ehrlich, and Dennis Harvey from Variety, who did like it. He says that it offers a potent testimony to the impact of citizen protest. Whatever. Okay.
You feel like a mean person, like, you know what I mean? Not liking something like that. Like,
it's tricky.
Hard.
It's tricky with documentaries because, like, how much is it? Were you responding to the theme, like what the movie is about? Are you responding to the subjects of the movie and something like this, or are you to the filmmaking? So it's tricky.
Yeah.
All right. But why don't you tell me about this other movie called Be Water?
Yeah. So this is a film about Bruce Lee and his life. It is very by the numbers. You're, kind of celebrity bio kind of thing.
Documentary?
It definitely felt more like something on television, and it was made by ESPN Films. And so it's basically like your 30 for 30 that they do, which I love. I love the 30 for 30s.
I've seen a couple of really great ones of those.
Yeah. And I love Bruce Lee. So I love martial arts films. I love Bruce Lee. And so I really enjoyed it. It is not significant in any way as far as filmmaking, but I just liked the topic, and so overall I enjoyed it. But
well, I like Bruce Lee too, so
so look forward. I'm 99% sure it's going to be a 30 for 30, so look for it.
All right,
it was good.
Sounds good. What about Save Yourselves! ! Okay,
so this I I had not seen anything that had really excited me up until this point. And we'll talk about the one I didn't like just before it. But so this movie I loved. I thought it was so funny. It's about these two hipsters that live in Brooklyn that they are like addicted to their phone, and I could totally relate to their behavior. Like, it was very realistic, I thought. And I loved the chemistry between the two actors. They were so good together, and I really bought them as a couple. And anyway, they decide that they are going to go to their friend's cabin that's up in upstate New York, and they're going to put away their cell phones. They're not going to look at their cell phones. And just while they decide to do this, there's an alien invasion, and everything goes crazy. And I laughed from start to finish. I thought it was so funny. I mean, and everything from like the I don't know. They try to make like at a certain point they try to make like a bug out bag, and all they have is like farm raised lamb, and they're like, could we have one non-perishable? And I don't. I thought it was hilarious. I loved it. The ending isn't perfect. The ending's kind of strange, but other than that, I really liked this movie a lot. It was very funny. So yeah, I think I hope people are gonna love it. I thought it was great, and I really it was both a hilarious comedy, but also a really really cute romance between these two, so that I highly recommend it. It was very good.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And Sunita Mani and John Reynolds are that actors' names, and they were really good together, I thought.
Great. And now tell me about this next movie, for which you are in the minority. I think the only rotten review on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment, it's from Rachel Wagner for the movie Kailin Air.
Yes.
So what is this about?
So this is a very Sundance-y movie. It's very droll. It's very long. It's very self-aware about this family of con artists that they do like sort of small grift jobs, and one day they meet this woman played by Gina Rodriguez, who like kind of wants it to be a bigger thing. Like she's really excited to get involved in, because she loves the oceans movies, and I found the whole thing to be insufferable and irritating and annoying and really boring. And I thought that the characters were really mean and not likable at all. And I don't know. And I felt like they would have a joke, and then they would just run that joke to the ground. It was for instance, there's a recurring joke that they live in this office space that's next to a bubble factory, and the wall leaks, and every day they have to soap up the soap. They have to mop up soap that leaks, and that was kind of funny the first time, and I swear they go to it 6 times at least, and so you're just kind of like, ugh. I don't know. I guess I've never seen anything by this director. The other reviews are like, oh, she's back. So I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I just thought it was really unpleasant and really irritating. I did not like it, but that's me. So I give it a 2 out of 10.
We should say the director is Miranda July, who her first movie was a big hit in Sundance about, I think it was in 2005 or 4, and it was called Me and You and Everyone We Know, and then she made a couple other movies. She has, like you say, a very specific kind of humor, very Sundance. I guess it's very Sundance-y in some ways. I don't know. She is, some people would say twee, some people would say quirky, definitely very specific. So I don't expect everyone to like this movie.
Yeah.
It sounds like something I would enjoy. So I think I might be into it.
Yeah.
Just based on everything you've said about being droll and characters being mean and whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
it'll be interesting to see what you think if you get to see it. It was not for me. So
yeah.
there you go. What are you going to do?
And now we have one last movie, which is called Rebuilding Paradise.
Yes. So until I saw Save Yourselves, this was my favorite of the festival so far. So this is a documentary about the town of Paradise, California, that was destroyed, almost every building destroyed in a horrible fire. And Ron Howard, the director, he does a really good job of getting interviews with a variety of citizens and kind of showing basically the year of rebuilding this town. And it's all of that stuff is fairly by the numbers, but very well done, very well executed. What made this one, I think, special for me is the first kind of 20 minutes are this. They have so much footage of the people leaving the fire because they didn't have much time to evacuate because it kind of jumped the fire, and it was really intense. I mean, there was just so many scenes of people just like completely covered in fire, and they're worried about their tires melting, and they're just like and I don't know, it was very well done. And he got Hans Zimmer to do the score, and so that helped a lot to kind of elevate it, and you really felt like you were there in this fire. And and so that was very intense and very well done, and kind of really grabbed you to the whole story because it starts out that way. And you've heard these people in their cars, trying to escape, and so you're already kind of invested in their story than going forward as just sort of a more normal documentary. But they definitely put some money in behind this, and I think it's National Geographic.
And directed by Ron Howard, huh? Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ron Howard. I mean, he's done a number of documentaries.
Mostly about bands, right? He did like a Beatles documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he did the one about Pavarotti last year.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So music.
So
He's moving into...
and I think he said...
Well, he now that I think about it, he also did that movie Backdraft about the firefighters back in the 90s, remember? So maybe he's gonna...
Well, I think he has relatives of some kind that lived in Paradise, and so that's why he felt particularly drawn to it. But anyway, I definitely recommend it. It'll probably end up on Disney Plus because it's National Geographic, so check it out.
Oh, good point. All right.
So there you go.
Okay.
That's the 11 I've seen.
Wow, great. So, okay. So an interesting Sundance, even if you don't have as many that you love, a lot of interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. Even some of the clunkers seem interesting in their own specific ways. So I'm looking forward to all these.
Yeah, it's a great experience. I always say, Sundance giveth and taketh away. Like,
of course, and that's the case at most festivals, probably. But
that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. So, I hope everybody's enjoyed this. I know it's a little different than our typical episode, but we just thought it would be kind of a fun. I felt like it was on brand, and it would be fun to talk about. And we'll have to do some kind of follow up of some kind with the second half of maybe real quick. Maybe in our February episode, we can do a quick little recap or something.
Yeah, definitely. We will have to check in and see if there's anything else that you loved or that you hated. You never know.
Right.
Yeah. So, and for our next episode, we haven't really talked about this offline, but it's my turn to pick, and I had the idea that because it's February and Valentine's Day is coming up, to do one of the movies that I think is most romantic and its 20th anniversary, which is the movie In the Mood for Love
Oh.
from Wong Kar-wai, a Hong Kong movie.
Oh.
That I think it's you. You talked about Brief Encounter before on this podcast that you saw,
Mm-hmm.
and this is very much inspired by that movie. So I'm curious to see what you think of it.
Oh, cool. I'm very excited to see it. So that'll be really fun. And let us know if you've been to a festival, what you think, whether you, what are some of the tips that you might give. We'd love to hear in the comment section or on Twitter. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. And in the meantime, we want to tell you that you can follow us on Twitter at Criterion Pod. And you can follow us personally on Twitter as well. I am at Coco Hits New York. And Rachel, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube. My blog is rachelsreviews.net and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out.
Yes, and we'll be back soon with more news from Sundance and with In the Mood for Love.
All right. Hey, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.